Margaret Kuhlman of Soul Astrology. In the run-up to this new moon, you may well have had a difficult time, an intense time. In the last few days, Venus has been over Pluto in Capricorn. So an examining of relationship, taking stock, perhaps, of who is a friend, measuring relationships in practical terms, of who is there for you, rather than who you like to think is part of your friendship group. And with the sextile from Venus and Pluto to Chiron, you might well have found yourself examining past difficulties, wondering if it's time to repair breaks or just to let the people go. And perhaps this month continues to be about that, following through on thoughts you have had, on situations that may have occurred. Mars has just passed its sextile to Uranus, so there may well have been a feeling of wanting to throw things out, fight for one's autonomy. And again, this month may be following through on decisions made as to where we need freedom, how much freedom we actually do require, and how much is taking us away from groups we may prefer to be in. And here we stand at the solstice, with the sun and moon in the very first minutes of the first degree of Capricorn, focusing us on the practicalities of life, on what actually is important in our foundations. And there's Mercury, having just connected with Neptune, keeping us in mind of the more spiritual side, the more soulful side of our physical preparations for any festivities going. As I looked at this chart, I felt all that fuss about buying presents and getting in food, all for a couple of days. I felt all that pressure fade away, and there was a sense of hearing the angels sing, as it were, singing about peace on earth. Neptune connecting into Capricorn. With this connection from Sun, Moon and Mercury to Neptune, we will all be feeling a whole lot more sensitive to the plight of humanity as a whole. And I feel I often say this, but Mercury is our consciousness. It's what we talk about. It's what we read in the papers or what we pick out from what we see. A sensitivity to other people's feelings. And that particularly is why I feel this run-up to the new moon may have been difficult. And perhaps what this month is also about. Not just empathising with suffering humanity, but actually doing something about it. And one of the beauties of Mars in Aquarius is that it is a motivation to work for humanity as a whole, and its connection to Uranus can be those sudden bursts of generosity to others, altruism, the food bank for those who are homeless, with all this buying of food, the check in the post, finally, for children somewhere else. The full moon chart is very dynamic. There's this double square, this T-square to Uranus from the sun and moon, the sun being powered up as it goes over Pluto, and both ends of that opposition of sun and moon, Pluto, connecting smoothly to Chiron. It's very much about recognising where we are wounded and doing something about it. By we, I mean humanity as a whole. The moon trining Chiron, and from Cancer, as it will be on the 5th of January, feeling of family feeling for people suffering everywhere. And again, the sudden actions with that connection to Uranus. But on a more personal note, my feeling is that we could be feeling a desire to throw out that which is not useful, not just possessions, but people and relationships. Specifically, I'm looking at Mercury and Venus, conjunct at the very beginning of Aquarius, and sextiling Saturn, who by the full moon will have just moved into Sagittarius at last, having spent 2.5 years going through Scorpio. The Aquarian take on relationship can often feel that people are not necessary, that we can manage without them, standing clear, getting a more detached view. But because of the dynamism of that T-square to Uranus, I feel that we might be tempted to act too quickly. Rather, it would be better to have ideas about what we might throw out, but perhaps put it in a holding place until we make up our minds more securely later. Saturn in Sagittarius is challenging us to look again at why we do things, to examine our beliefs, and to measure, to check those beliefs against the reality of now. Not just outside ourselves, but inside ourselves, to actually bring our beliefs and our attitudes up to date with how we have changed over the years. As Saturn has been going through Scorpio, we will all have been examining ourselves at a much deeper level. And so this movement into Sagittarius opens the window to following through on a mental level and on a heart level, integrating our deeper understanding with what we think and say about life. Jupiter in Leo is now retrograde, and so our sense of ourselves is to be more integrated rather than expanded. Things that have seemed very important and have been top priority in our actions may just sink back a bit, and we're being asked to rework the foundations, especially this Capricorn month. As Saturn rules Capricorn, we need to be open to new ideas about those foundations. Never mind the tried and tested that Capricorn normally depends on. There needs to be an open attitude, a preparedness to try different ways to see what works best. A combination of the Sagittarian experimenter and the Capricorn pragmatist. However, the basic flavour of the month has Saturn in Scorpio, just in the very last degree, and it will be returning to Scorpio later in 2015 for a last brief visit, indicating that there are still things we need to discover and own up to. Capricorn sometimes feels as though it is a bit heavy. We prefer the enjoyment of the fruits rather than the labour that brings them about, generally speaking. But Capricorn is also about the results of our labours, and resting on that security of knowing that you have done the necessary work can be the most relaxing place, and sharing the work with others can be the most beautiful labour. Speak. Don't be shy. Stand on your ground and tell the story that is important to you. You have no idea who may need to hear your particular experience and understanding. You are important for just who you are, one piece in the ground of spirit that holds the edifice of life in sweet harmony, one in the one love.